Namaste. Welcome to another episode of the Indic Explorer. I am your host, Div3 I am a seeker of original Indic wisdom, and I bring to you insights and opinions on what you may want to watch, hear, or read to guide you on your own journey of seeking original Indic wisdom, the kind of competent wisdom that helps us navigate the ups and downs of life and make it more fulfilling. Today we will explore the book Ramayana Unravelled, Lesser Known Facets of Rishi Valmiki's Epic by Ami Ganatra. Having read the book, according to me, the facets delivered in this book are one of the most objective reading between the lines of the epic, staying true to the intent and objectives of the original author, Rishi Valmiki. It is not a retelling of Ramayana in any way, but it is a revisiting of different key events of the epic, getting back to the original meaning, intent, and context, which somehow have been lost or diluted over time. Now, Ami Ganatra's writing process takes you back into that time and also helps you see the events through the lens of that time, which is extremely crucial because that is how the reader is able to come very close to being able to know what Rishi Valmiki was really trying to say. I was able to distill some takeaways that, in my opinion, are far superior and extremely nuanced as compared to any latest leadership wisdom that emerge from a Western lens. Now, these key takeaways, like I said, are from a leadership perspective. That doesn't mean you have to be CEO or king or president or prime minister in order for these takeaways to be relevant to you. You may be a leader at home with your children. As a parent, you're a leader. You may be a leader in your family, extended family, among your friends. You may be the person who has some influence over how the group behaves, setting the tone of the group. You may be leading one or two people or more at work. So as long as you are in a position of some kind of power or influence over how the group you are with behaves, then the key takeaways from this book are relevant to you because it is from a leadership perspective. Key takeaway number 1. Non-negotiable following through of the promises you make. Now, I am not talking about the promise that Dashratha made to Kaikeyi. That is debatable. I am talking about the promise that Rama made to his father Dashratha, that yes, I will give up all my royal luxuries and I will go live in the forest for the stipulated amount of time. Even when there were compelling reasons, logical reasons, a lot of public support of the Council of Ministers for him to go back on that promise and to stay back, he did not give up. He stuck through that promise, not because he likes to suffer, but he wants to uphold the principle that in that time, once a son makes a promise to a father, he follows through no matter what. This was his way of displaying to the public to set an example that this is the sanctity of a father-son relationship, the standards of the sanctity of a father-son relationship, that once a promise is made, it has to be followed through. He is someone who is loved and adored and looked up to by people. He has celebrity status. What he does sets the tone for the rest of the society. And so no matter how difficult the nature of the promise was, that's not the thing we're discussing here. It's the fact that once a promise is made to the father, it has to be followed through. And setting that example basically made the fabric of that society and maintained the fabric of that society, because other mere mortals will now know that this is the ideal to aspire towards. If I cannot live up to the promise or go through it, let me not make it in the first place. But once, as a son or a child, I make a promise to the parent, the expectation is that I have to follow through. In our life today, it makes sense to uphold this principle as a leader, because it is a great value to have. It will improve the dynamics of a group, and it will improve the productivity and overall well-being of the group, whether you lead a family or friends or a group of people at work. Key takeaway number 2: prevent the exploitation of your power. Shurpanakha used Ravana to get her own egoistic ends met, which is revenge on the people, Rama and Lakshmana, who, according to her, had wronged her. She, in fact, exploited Ravana's weakness for beautiful women to instigate him to take action to serve her ego. And what happens in this case is that he got stuck in those problems that were never his to begin with, and then invited dooms on himself and everybody else that he was leading. Basically, the more power and influence that you have, the lesser the privilege you have of having weaknesses, because those weaknesses can be exploited by others for their selfish needs. And so in our life, we don't want to become a toy for others to use, but be a sane, objective leader who can discern clearly why somebody is trying to influence us. Is that influence for some kind of personal benefit, or is that influence for the benefit of the larger good? Key takeaway number 3: the weaker one cannot antagonize the stronger one. This one comes from the Vanara storyline or subplot of the Ramayana epic. I found their politics and dynamics extremely interesting, and especially the story of Angad, Vali's son. I remember always wondering at the back of my head whenever I saw Ramayana or read about it, how come Angad is on Sugriv's side, his uncle, who was responsible for killing Angad's father, Vali. And I always thought, how did this happen? How is it so easy to just side with your uncle when he killed your father? And this question got answered when I read this book, because it does mention justifiably about Angad's dichotomy, where he has doubts and fears and insecurities about siding with his uncle. He's not able to fully trust Sugriva, and he thinks of ways to branch out on his own despite him not being very strong, not having a lot of support. He also thinks of giving up on his life so that he doesn't have to face a terrible fate at the hands of his uncle Sugriva, which he imagines a terrible fate awaits him if he sides with Sugriva, and he's in two minds. And that is when Hanuman comes in, sensing this, to counsel Angad sternly, but does not force him, but sternly lets him know, for the greater good, that the one who is weaker cannot live peacefully by antagonizing the stronger person. It is always wise for the weaker side to patch up with the one who is undoubtedly stronger. A very strategic input by Hanuman to save this relationship and save the dynamic between Angad, who is the crown prince, and Sugriva, who is the king right now, for everyone's good. And that brings to my mind the Russia-Ukraine war, actually, because I wonder if it was really wise for an undoubtedly weak Ukraine to confront Russia the way it did. Of course, there are problems and they need to be addressed and resolved, but it makes me wonder if there was another way that the problems could have been solved, that some kind of status quo could have been achieved. Most probably, the weaker side, undoubtedly weaker side, would have to take a hit, especially the pride of the leadership would have to take a hit when confronting or when trying to patch up with an undoubtedly stronger country. But at the loss of the pride of the leadership, there could have been minimum loss to the people on the weaker side. The larger good would have been taken care of if the weaker side, I feel, would have found another way to resolve things and to patch up with someone who is undoubtedly stronger. Key takeaway number 4: epitome of servant leadership. There is a lot of talk about servant leadership today, and if anyone's looking for the ideal example, Sri Rama is the epitome of servant leadership. He not only put himself through hardships to set the right precedent for his people, he also went through the additional extreme pain of putting his beloved Sita through hardships and public indignity to prove herself to the people that they would rule later. Because if they were to be king and queen after her return from Lanka, and there were questions about her character, that would cause obstacles in the way of them ruling their kingdom effectively, and obstacles in the path of establishing dharma in the society of people that they are leading. And so, unlike a regular person who could just indulge his beloved the moment they're back, Sri Rama had to first prove to his masters, his people, that the love of his life is capable of being their queen, that her character is exemplary. That had to be proved first because he's a leader, a servant leader. And then he had the privilege of indulging his personal emotions of happiness and joy that his beloved is back. And so there is nobody who is as perfect as him when it comes to exemplifying servant leadership. And that is the ideal that anyone who's on the path of embracing servant leadership can look up to and aspire towards. So these are some of the takeaways from this book. There are so many more which I would like to cover with you and share with you. Stay tuned for part 2 and 3 to cover all other takeaways that I have distilled from this book. Till then, take care, goodbye, and let's stay on the path of Dharma.